So I was just doing some work and something really bothered me about my architecture. So a lot of you might know I've been thinking a lot lately about file structures. Where do I put things so that I end up with an architecture that's really separated but really easy to understand at the same time? And so one of the things I've been doing lately, let me just map this out. I've had my pages directory, and then I've also had my components directory, which sits outside of that. Let's see if I can map this in a sensical way. So usually this is my app, and then I'll have all of my app related servers kind of in a mono repo. So you might have like API here for your server. And just to kind of make this a fuller example, I might have another app here called admin. So this is for the front end for client facing, and then this is back end admin, or you might call this client, whatever you like. And then inside of app, let's just go with the app architecture for now. I've got my pages. And then what I would do is I would have another thing at this level, another folder at this level, which is for components or like model components, for example. So like, or even just like you might have like, for example, here components, and then inside of there you might have base components. I'm trying to think of like an ideal architecture here. If I was like starting from scratch, I probably have base components like that, and that's where you'd hold things like your base dialogue, because I have a very specific way I like doing dialogues that I use across all of my applications. So now app can draw from these components, admin can draw from these components, any future apps can all sort of draw from this one area. Now let's connect these together so it's a little bit clearer that where everything belongs. And I'm going to show you the thing that I kind of just nutted out recently around architecture. So that's one thing. Then there's models as well. So one thing I've started doing now, and I'm trying to make it so that all of my logic for building one specific thing. For example, let's just say you're working on your comment system for your application. I want all of my comment logic to be grouped together. That's what I'm aiming for, because the more that that's grouped together, the easier it is for me to work on it. I want my tests. I want my test page. Let's imagine I have like a playground. I want that page, the models themselves, the schemas, all of that stuff to be sitting in one folder. If I can do that, that's ideal for me, rather than having it all in different folders all over the place. Because if they're in different folders all over the place, it's really difficult to sort of create one world. You're jumping around too much. It's much nicer to me to have one structure. So then I would have something like this, models, because I group things by models. Maybe that's not the right name. I think it is, but I don't know. We'll see what I discover with this. And then you might have in there, for example, comments. And I'll have all of my comments in here. And by the way, if you end up with a really large application, then you might change this from models to, I don't know, something else. And then you might nest things a little bit deeper. But I try to keep things as flat as possible. So you might have in here comments. You might have another one which is for, I don't know, managing users. And I probably would capitalize that. Yeah, user like this. And let me just do one more example, post. And then nested within comment, for example, I'll have something like the comment itself. So that will be comment.js. All right. And this is my comment world. This is where I do everything related to comments. And then I might have inside of there, let's just create some more space here. Get all this connected together. Because I think I'm actually going to keep this board. This is going to be like my source of truth for how I do folder structures for new applications. They're a little bit larger than most. Yeah, so then you might have comment.js. What else would you have in here? Then I would have another folder called components, right? And maybe I wouldn't have components actually. Maybe I'd have something like this, like tables and then cards. You get the idea. And then if that got overwhelming and there were too many folders, you might have a components directory as well. So at this point, you can then decide if you want to sort of nest things a little bit further. But I think that's kind of how I do it. Another thing I always have is a schema for all of my models. So we'd have another one here called comment schema.json. or maybe even just comment.json, and then the JSON part implies a schema. I don't know, comment schema.json is probably better. And the reason I have this is I always use schemas to then automatically generate my classes for the front end and the back end. It allows me to generate everything all off of one schema. So it's kind of like an isomorphic type thing. It's not true isomorphism or whatever the word is for that, but it means that I can automatically generate front and back end code. So this comment.js file could automatically be generated off of this schema, and I know that the front and back end files for those, including all the relationships, are going to look the same. That's why I like to have this schema file. But I'm going to get to the point soon of what I'm getting at. But I thought I'd give you all a little bit of a larger image here. We're going to need more space. So then in tables, I might have something like this. I might have then comment table.view, and then I might have comment row.view. It makes it very, very easy to then start splitting everything apart. And then I might have comment columns, or at this point I could probably just say columns.js. The reason I use the whole name for my view files is because Vue wants your file name to match up with the component name. And so I usually restate the comment word here rather than just saying table.view. I find it just a little bit easier to develop that way. But then I have like comment columns.js, and I think you're starting to get the picture here. And if the logic gets a bit heavy inside of the table, then I might have, for example, use comment table.js, like composables. It just makes it really nice for sort of creating this architecture. All right, so let's link all that up just to show that they're all nested within there. There we go. Now, here's the problem I had. So the next thing I would do is, let's link this up nicely. When I was doing my pages, I then might have, for example, I like to mimic my routes in my pages. So I might have comments, what would we call this? Maybe like, yeah, a comments folder like that. And then another one called like comment page dot view. And that means if I go to /comments, then I would get the comment page. And I'm still trying to figure out how to set this up really nicely with auto routing. I want something that's kind of like Nuxt auto routing, but I want something that I'm trying to get something where I can say, for example, index page here. Yeah, let's do the ideal here. Ideally, I want to be able to say index page, and anything with the word page afterwards is then automatically generated for me. So it means that I can have more files inside of here that aren't automatically going to generate a route. So supporting files, rather than having to do this underscore thing, I want to be able to just add my supporting files in, and everything with page gets included in the routes. But that's something for another day. So currently what I'm doing is I will then, in my index page, do all of my fetching, right? All of my fetching of data happens here. I never, ever include any of that fetching data in any of these components. These are completely agnostic to how the data is fetched. And that's really important because I want to make sure that I keep that separation so that I can easily test these and build these in isolation. It makes these components super portable, makes it really easy to change the backend at some point, switch between like, Laravel backend and local storage, for example. You get super, flexible code. And that usually doesn't matter for smaller applications, but as your apps start to scale, and you start considering different backends or maybe having split backends for different tasks, it's really helpful to know that your components are agnostic to how it gets the data. So even creating data, if this comment table is going to create a comment, then it alerts the parent, all right, and then the parent, which in this case would be the page, is then in charge of creating that data. But the problem is, I was then switching back and forth too much between this index page and then my comment folder. When I'm developing, I'm going to spend all of my time in here so that I can super hone in and just focus on my comment logic. If I want to add fields, I just add them in here. If I want to, then I can just come into my comment table and then add the fields in, or my comment cells and add them in. And it's kind of really easy to think that way because you're sitting inside of the same folder. Um, but the problem I ran into is then when I started doing all my fetching and all of my creating, I had to switch back into this index page. So what I now want to do is add a new folder in here. And this is what I'm thinking about doing now, called views. And I've toyed with this concept before, but now I think I want to go all in with it. And then all that the index page does is it's only in charge of sending parameters from the route, for example, down into the view. And so this index page will then pull out this view from here, and it will send down, for example, maybe the comment, maybe the user ID. I don't know, that might not be the best example, but it might send down a user ID and any other data that this might require in order for it to be contextual. So maybe even a business ID. All of that stuff would then be sent down to the comment view. All right. So instead of view, we might say manage. And this is really, comment is probably a bad example here, but I'm just thinking architecturally. So manage comments view. That might be called something like that. That gets sent down there. And then the cool thing about this is now all of my logic around fetching the comments sets in here, creating them, updating them, deleting them. This little section here is allowed to know about making requests. It's allowed to have that extra little bit of knowledge. And then the index page, its job is only to then display the view. Now, the cool thing about this is I set up my index page and I pass it the user ID and the business ID or whatever contextual knowledge it needs down to the view. Once I've done that, I'm done. I don't need to sit in this file anymore. I can now do everything inside of this little comment world directory. All right, this is the key thing here, being able to just jump into this directory and be like, okay, I just need to change some aspects of the view. Maybe I'm doing some padding, I'm changing the display. Now I'm jumping into the comment JSON schema and I'm adding in different fields for the comment because I decided I wanted to add in the user ID because it wasn't there. I want to add, updated at or edited at fields. I can do all of that inside of here. And then I'm thinking to myself, okay, now we need to do the table and then do the cards for the comments and decide what they look like. And then I want to, group all of these together, the tables and the cards into one view here, which is going to be my managed comments view. And I'm never leaving this folder. And it means that when new devs come onto the project, you can just say to them, okay, your job is very simple. All you have to do is create a new folder that looks like this, and you can easily have a generator. You can imagine you'd have a generator where they can say, I'm creating a new model for XYZ, and then it automatically creates this folder with all of these folders nested in it. And then maybe you've got more generators that can say, hey, create a table for a comment, which then creates all of these folders as well. And then all they have to do is sit inside of this world. And by the way, you know what? Let's just finish out this example here, making it a little bit more robust. I would then have a test directory here. And I haven't done this yet. I'm still trying to figure out what this will look like. But this is what I've been getting in my head. And I sort of want to spit it out so that you guys, all know sort of where my current thinking is at with this. I might have then a comment dot test dot, I don't really know, I can't remember what these files look like, .test.js. It's been a while since I've done very specific Cypress testing. But then inside of my test directory, I might also have a playground, or maybe that's separate to the test directory, right? So if you need it, you can also have a playground directory here. And then my ultimate goal is to then have another folder. So if we come out here, and I might just make it clearer that these are all sort of folders on the same level. So how about we do something like this? Let's say that, and we'll give it a background of like green. we'll fade it out a little bit, and then we'll send it to the back. Yeah, send to back, and maybe get rid of the border. And I'm going to grab all of these and just make them white. Give me all the shapes. Sorry, this is more design stuff now. And then I'll make this green again. I love Miro. It makes it so easy to do this kind of thing. All right, just so we know that this is like our root folders. And I might even name it like this, so I can use this in the future, know what's going on. Root, dir. Yeah, there we go. All right, so then eventually I want to have here a playground. I don't know what I'd call that, but that's another project. And what it does is it pulls out it finds all of my playground folders. So it's going to automatically go through all of these folders and find the playground directories and then pull the pages out of them. So this playground has now got a page, right? So maybe we call this like, I don't know, default playground.view. And then what it does is it automatically, and we might represent this with some dotted lines, finds these playground directories, and there we go. So it automatically finds them and then displays them in this other app. So you've got an app here dedicated to just kind of messing around with these components and seeing what they look like. So then if you're a new dev, once you've created this folder, you also get this playground where you can then just sort of mess around with it. You know, it's in its own sort of contained environment. You've got these test folders. You can use Cypress to do component testing and test your comment. But then if you don't want to do testing, you want something that's more flexible where you can just like, you know, turn attributes on and off, you know, change the color, you know, just screw around with your component, then this special playground app is going to allow you to do that. And it's going to automatically find these playground folders and then pull out that component like this. So I feel like that would be really cool. And once again, this comes back to that original idea that I had where everything just sits in this same world. My testing happens here. My playground for messing around with the component happens here. Making my view with all of the logic for creating, updating, deleting the data, that all happens sitting inside of here. And then you might even have, for example, a use, we need to zoom in a bit here. You know, I'd probably just reuse that and say use manage components view.js. So it's really easy now to separate all of your concerns here. It's really easy to add all of your logic in the right place when you do it this way, because it's like, you know, oh, I need some logic for something that's related to this view. It's blatantly obvious that you just stick it right there inside of this folder. You know, I need to do logic for my tables and I want to pull apart my logic for my tables. It's blatantly obvious where that JavaScript goes. But if you put everything inside of a comments directory, for example, sorry, if you have a components directory and you just throw everything in there, it becomes so ridiculously difficult to manage everything. You then make a new folder, and then inside of that, you know, you might have a comment table folder inside of your components directory, but then it's like, well, I've then got another component for my models. So if I need to go to my, you know, comment.js file, I need to go find that. And it just doesn't make sense because that's not how we develop. Now, there are problems with this architecture. It can be a little bit more locked in. So you do need to make sure that you have a really robust setup from the beginning. Because it's more difficult to change an architecture like this. And this is why I'm doing this a lot later on in my career, where I'm like, okay, I know the patterns that I'm doing over and over and over again now. I know that I can build an architecture that I can trust is going to scale really well. And the other thing is, I also know that editors are getting really good, so it's easy to refactor. So if I make a mistake with this architecture, sure, it might take me a little bit longer to refactor my code out when you do things in this way. But having said that, the tooling around refactoring is getting a lot better for Vue now, and it's getting a lot easier to say, hey, when I move this file, make sure you update all the references. You know, stuff like aliasing is making it more possible to do these kind of architectures. So yeah, this is what I'm aiming for now, trying to get all of that logic into one place. Now, there are some things I wouldn't put here, like I've seen some people. A friend of mine actually does boot files inside of there as well, and their routes inside of here. I don't think I do that because I don't really think my routing is related to my comment model. Sometimes I might have a comment route that's actually showing a bunch of other stuff, and then later on, my comment route might actually turn into something a little bit more abstract. It might be like a, you know, I don't know, user resources route, and then comments is part of it, and it just changes a little bit too much. So I do still, I like the idea of having Nuxt-like routing here, but then pulling out views from my models directory like this. But then one of the places this breaks down is maybe you have a view that isn't just for a comment, it's kind of for more things. And in that case, this is something I still need to figure out. Then I might end up having like a views directory here. So once I've created all of my views for my models, I would then aggregate those into another view inside of this components directory. Right, keeping in mind this components directory is sitting outside of the models directory. It's sitting outside of my apps directory, so it's very reusable. And then maybe then this index page, for example, it might draw from here, or if I need that extra flexibility, it will then draw from over here. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. That kind of adds a bit of complexity because you're sort of now mixing and matching your worlds. And maybe I wouldn't do a view there. Maybe in that case, my index page would draw from multiple views. But I don't know. You are going to eventually you're going to need a directory for views that don't really fit the models paradigm, because sometimes you have tools that aren't really related to models. They're just sort of something else. So in that case, you would then need to have like a views directory sitting inside of a components directory. So I need to nut out exactly what that's going to look like. But yeah, this is what I'm heading towards now. And I'm now going to start building this into my robust Quasar. What do you call it? It's like I'm going to create a GitHub repo for a robust Quasar sort of starter kit. And this is what it's going to look like, something like this. But just to give you a little bit more context, you know what? Let's copy all of this. Gosh, I love Miro. I love that I can just do this and just whack it down there. At some point down the line, if you really scale your application, so this is the problem that we're running into, the work I'm currently at, you might need to go one step further. So like, this is not going to be the best example, but I just want to kind of give you a little bit more context here. You might have, for example, user interactions. Let's just say you want to nest it a little bit deeper because you're starting to organize things by domain. So you might have user interactions, and then you might have comments in there, and then you might have like, I don't know, photos inside of there, which is like a comment directory. And you can imagine photos would also have a structure that looks like this comment structure we've got here. So at some point, when you really need to scale beyond this, you can still do it. And this is how I would do it. I would then say and you'd have to change the name of that actually to models to, I don't know, business logic, or, this is going beyond anything that I've built now. But this is what we're starting to do, because we have the concept of livestock where I work. And then we've got the concept of cropping, right? And the good thing about nesting at one level deeper like this, and please don't do this unless you know what you're doing and you've been building your application for a long time and these patterns are clear, or you've sat down, you spent the time figuring out what your domain looks like. But we might have livestock and cropping, and by doing this, we can now have other things at this level. So you might have then inside of here models, right? And this becomes your business, or maybe we'll call that domain or whatever. And then this gets nested inside of models like this. So let me just get this looking a little bit more logical here. And the cool thing is you can now have specific livestock related views, right? And that can sit at this level, which is something that you would totally do. And then, that would then draw from stuff for your models directory. Or you might have composables that need to be shared across all of your livestock related stuff. And then we end up going a little bit deeper here where we've got livestock Let me just get rid of that for now because it's starting to sort of break down. So then in our models, we might have, for example, trials and then actuals, which is totally something that we do. And then that gets nested one level deeper as well. In fact, that wouldn't be models. It would be something like this. Right? So then you've got your trials and your actuals, and then they have a models directory. Right? And this is why it's really good to have something like Miro so you can nut all of this stuff out first. And then inside of that, I might have we've got like reproduction life cycles, right? And you get the idea. So now we've got the ability to scale this, and we can put like, other models inside of there. And if we ever needed to nest that a little bit deeper, we could. So this is where you sort of start reaching a level where you start organizing it by domain. And you can do some pretty interesting stuff with, Vite and Webpack to sort of automatically understand these structures and pull out folders and directories and, automatically find models sitting inside of directories. You can find all the directories with the name model and then go one level deeper and then pull out anything that says like, I don't know, model.js, or I don't know, in this case, you might say, for example, schema.json. Yeah, the idea being that you can go, some people don't like Webpack and Vite Magic. If you really want, you can then start doing crazy stuff with like index files or whatever. But what I like to do is use just a little bit of magic that understands my folder structures and then follow a very specific rules around my folder structures enforced using things like generators, which allow me to very easily then find all of my schemas and then turn those into like models on the back end, stuff like that. But anyway, I won't go into that right now. So this is like a lot deeper. I just wanted to show you that this does scale beyond what I'm showing you inside of here, where everything is just organized by models. If you do need that extra bit of folder structure, you can totally do it. But this is what I'm going to be aiming for in the project that I'm building. I want to be able to say, this is my components directory that's going to have my base components. And I also have another one in there, by the way, which is like, I'd probably call it model components or something like that, which are components for dealing with models that deal with the back end. And then I will have my models directory, which has all of that logic related to that model, or at least as much as I possibly can sitting inside of that directory. So it's very easy to create a quote unquote world that you can sort of play around with in order to build your logic. Really great for beginner programmers, because you just say to them, look, use a generator, create a model. Now that you've got your model, just jump into that directory and you teach them one by one what each of these folders mean, and they can easily, quickly start playing around. You can even just start them off straight away with the playground, and then, for example, the table directory, and then you can say, you just jump into this playground, and then you start sort of playing around with your table. And it's a very small surface area that you need to teach new developers on the team. And they don't have to jump around from folder to folder. They just do everything directly in here, and it's easier for you as well because everything's just contained in that smaller world. And then what you do is, when your newer developers on the team, once they've built it, it can then be your responsibility to then do the extra work of adding it into the page. Your work can be around building the views and doing the more advanced logic around doing the requests and all of that. And they don't have to worry about any of that. They just sit in these folders doing very specific jobs. And then when they're ready, you can be like, okay, cool. Have a look at the way I build views, and you can start building your own views as well now. And then when they get good at that, you can be like, okay, cool, now you can build views. This is how you tie it into the application, like you tie it into the routing. And so you can gradually just sort of bring them into the fold. That's one of the other cool things about a folder structure like this. Even though it's difficult it's a little bit more of a learning curve to be able to do everything. It's actually a smaller learning curve to onboard new people with an architecture like this. At least that's my theory. I haven't actually tested this theory yet, so I can't say that for sure. But I would imagine having a structure like this where they've got a smaller world and a smaller amount of stuff they have to do would make it easier for them to just do like these micro tasks. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. Now I'm happy I've got this down now. I can now use this to then start rejigging my base application for helping new Quasar devs build scalable applications. All right, hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in a future stream.